He had destroyed empires. He had buried enemies in concrete and silence. He had stood in rooms where men trembled just hearing his name. But the moment Kang Tae-hyun walked through those gilded ballroom doors and saw her, standing in a black gown, commanding an entire room full of Seoul's most powerful people with nothing but her voice and her spine, every wall he had spent 5 years building cracked straight down the middle. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be alive in his world anymore. And yet there she was, the woman he had thrown away, the woman whose face he still saw at 3 a.m. when the whiskey ran out and the guilt came flooding in, Amara Bennett, his wife, the one he had destroyed with his own hands. If you've ever loved someone so completely that losing them broke something in you that never healed, stay with me. Like this video, drop a comment with the city you're watching from, and let's see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Tet. The charity gala for the Seoul Children's Welfare Foundation had been running for 11 years, but no one who attended the 12th edition would ever forget it. Not because of the guests, not because of the money raised, not because of the speeches delivered from the gleaming podium at the far end of the ballroom. They would remember it because of what happened between two people who were never supposed to be in the same room again. The convention center sat on the northern bank of the Han River, 42 stories of glass and steel that reflected the city's skyline back at itself like a vanity mirror for the ultra-rich. By 7:30 in the evening, every level of the building below the 32nd floor had been sealed off to the public. The 32nd floor itself, the Grand Celestial Ballroom, a name chosen by some interior designer who clearly charged by the syllable, had been transformed over the preceding 72 hours into something that looked less like a charity event and more like a coronation. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from a ceiling that had been painted a deep midnight blue and dusted with what the event brief described as hand-applied metallic luminescence, which was a $40,000 way of saying someone had spent 3 days gluing gold flakes to plaster. Round tables dressed in ivory and black silk seated 10 guests each, and there were 40 of them arranged in concentric arcs around a central dance floor of white marble so polished it reflected the room above like still water. String quartet, champagne service, flower arrangements taller than most men. It was, by any measurable standard, excessive. And it worked exactly because of that. The woman responsible for all of it stood near the service corridor entrance on the east wall, a wireless earpiece in her left ear, a tablet in her hand, and an expression on her face that gave away precisely nothing. Amara Bennett was 34 years old, 5'8" in flat shoes. She was wearing heels tonight, which put her eye level with men who thought height was a form of authority. And she wore a floor-length gown in matte black that moved when she moved, and was still when she was still. Her hair was pulled back with the kind of deliberate precision that took 45 minutes to achieve and looked entirely effortless. She wore no statement jewelry. She didn't need to. She was already the most composed person in the room, and the room was full of people who paid significant money to appear composed. Catering, I need the second course held for 12 minutes, she said quietly into her earpiece, her voice even. Delegate Park is still speaking, and he runs long. If we break for dinner while he's mid-sentence, we lose the room's goodwill for the rest of the evening. Hold the course. A crackle of acknowledgement from the kitchen. She moved 3 steps to her left, angled her tablet, checked the lighting cue timeline, and flagged a discrepancy between what the venue's AV team had loaded and what her brief specified for the 8:45 presentation segment. She typed a correction and sent it without looking up. Amara. Her assistant, a 26-year-old named Jisoo, who had been working with her for 2 years and had never once seen her flustered, appeared at her elbow. The Black Phoenix table, table 7. They're requesting a second bottle of the Petrus before dinner service. Give them the Petrus, Amar said. That's the last one from the allocated reserve. Then give them the last one. She still didn't look up. Table 7 is Kang Tae-hyun's table. You do not tell Kang Tae-hyun the wine has run out. Jisoo hesitated. You know him? I know who he is, Amar said, and her voice did not change at all. Everyone in this building knows who he is. That's why we give him the last bottle. Jisoo nodded and disappeared. Amara looked back at her tablet. She did not think about the name. She didn't allow herself to. She had spent 5 years building a very specific and very deliberate architecture inside herself. Compartments, locks, sealed rooms, and the name Kang Tae-hyun lived behind a door she kept shut with everything she had. Tonight was a job. It was a significant job, her firm's largest contract of the year, and it would go perfectly because she had spent 3 months making sure it would go perfectly. And she was not going to let a name on a guest list unravel 3 months of work. She had known his table was booked. She had seen it 6 weeks ago when the confirmed guest list came through. She had processed it the way she processed every other line on that list. Allocated seating, dietary requirements, security clearance for the private arrival entrance, and she had moved on. The door stayed shut. She was good at that. She had become extraordinary at it. At 8:17, the ballroom was at 80% capacity, and the string quartet had transitioned to the more sophisticated register of the evening's program, which meant quieter, more intentional pieces designed to create the impression of culture without demanding attention. Amara had moved to the opposite side of the room, near the podium, to conduct a final check on the microphone levels and confirm the teleprompter position with the Foundation's director. She was mid-sentence when she felt it. Not heard, not saw. Felt. The particular shift in barometric pressure that a room undergoes when someone walks into it who everyone recognizes. The microscopic recalibration of attention. 100 pairs of eyes moving in the same direction without coordinating to do so. The way iron filings orient to a magnet. The almost imperceptible drop in the ambient conversational noise as people registered the new arrival and their social antenna computed the appropriate response. Amara finished her sentence to the director. She did not turn around. The teleprompter speed, she said. Director Yoon prefers it slightly slower than the default setting. I've already adjusted it, but confirm with her before she takes the podium. She turned around because she had to. She needed to cross to the east side to check the reserved seating arrangement before the final wave of guests was seated. She turned around with her tablet in front of her and her eyes on the screen. She looked up because she was a professional and she needed to navigate a crowded room. And then she saw him. The door did not crack. It did not slowly open. It blew off its hinges. Kang Tae-hyun stood at the ballroom entrance approximately 40 feet away, and he was wearing a black suit that had been made for his specific body by someone who understood that certain men cannot wear off-the-rack clothing because their particular dimensions, the width of the shoulder, the depth of the chest, the precise length of arm, exist outside standard templates. He was 38 years old, and he looked like someone had taken the concept of controlled danger and made it flesh. Dark hair cut short, a jaw that appeared to have been constructed for the sole purpose of making difficult decisions. Eyes that were, at this distance, an indeterminate dark color, but Amara knew exactly what color they were because she had spent 2 years studying them across pillows, and across our arguments, and across the kind of silence that only exists between two people who know each other completely. He was not looking at her. He was scanning the room the way his people always scanned rooms. Efficient, systematic, 3-point assessment of entry, exit, and threat. 2 men flanked him, broad and still, the kind of stillness that was trained rather than natural. Beside him, her hand resting in the crook of his arm with the proprietary ease of a woman who had decided to make ownership visible, was Yoona Seo. Amara had done her research when she'd seen the guest list. She'd done it professionally, as she did research on all significant attendees about background, associations, known connections to the event's stakeholders. Yoona Seo, 29, daughter of a Busan shipping magnate, now operating in the orbit of the Black Phoenix Syndicate, with an intimacy that the tabloid press described variously as companion, associate, and potential future Mrs. Kang. She was beautiful in the way that required maintenance, polished, deliberate, aware of herself from every angle. None of that registered to Amara as threat or competition. What registered was the positioning, Tae-hyun's left arm, the hand on his sleeve, the angle of Yoona's body turned toward him like a plant toward a light source. 5 years ago, that had been Amara's position. 5 years ago, she had stood beside this man at a charity gala that wasn't dissimilar to this one, and she had worn red instead of black, and she had held his arm, and she had believed, with the complete and total conviction of someone who has never yet been betrayed by their own trust, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She looked away from him. She looked away because looking was dangerous, and because she had work to do, and because she had made peace with all of this. She had made peace, she had done the work, she had rebuilt herself from the foundation up, and she was not going to stand in the middle of the most important event of her professional year and let 5 years of carefully constructed equilibrium dissolve in 30 seconds, just because Kang Tae-hyun was handsome in a suit. She crossed the room. She kept her pace even. She spoke into her earpiece about the seating arrangement update. She did not look back. She was almost to the east wall when Jisoo materialized again. "He's here," Jisoo said, unnecessarily. "I see the guest list is complete," Amara said. "Good. Jisoo seemed to be struggling with professional discretion and the very human desire to communicate something she believed was important. He stopped. When he came in, he stopped walking for a second, and he was looking. "Jisoo." Amara's voice was gentle. It was also final. "The seating cards for table 12 need to be confirmed before the next wave is seated. Can you handle that for me?" Jisoo, to her credit, understood. "Yes, of course." She left. Amara stood still for exactly 3 seconds, which was the amount of time she permitted herself. Then she opened her tablet and went back to work. Taehyun had stopped walking because he had no choice. He had scanned the room the way he always scanned rooms. 40 years of survival instinct operating faster than conscious thought, cataloging threats before pleasure, exits before ambiance. And then something in his peripheral vision had overridden the entire system. A woman in black, standing at the far side of the room, the set of her shoulders, the angle of her head, the way she held her tablet not in front of her chest like a shield, but at her hip like a tool, like something she was completely at ease with, like competence was her natural resting state. His chest did something that it had no business doing in a ballroom full of criminal associates and charity donors, and Yuna's hand on his arm. "Tae-hyun." Yuna's voice, quiet and pleasant. She had learned not to use a sharp tone in public. "Something wrong?" "No," he said. His voice worked fine. It always worked fine. "Checking the room." He moved. Yuna moved with him. He did not let himself look toward the east wall again. He failed at this within 4 minutes. The woman was Amara. He knew it before he could see her face clearly, because the body doesn't need the face. The body recognizes things it has spent years in proximity to, and his body recognized Amara Bennett across 40 feet of candlelit ballroom with the same absolute certainty that it would have recognized her in the dark. The way she stood, the economy of her movement, the quality of stillness she had when she wasn't moving, like someone who was always thinking 3 things simultaneously and had learned to let the thinking happen behind a composed surface. He had loved that quality about her. It had made him feel, when they were together, like there was someone in the world who genuinely understood what it meant to operate under constant pressure without letting it show. She'd had that long before she met him. She hadn't learned it from him. It was intrinsic. He had told her that once, on a quiet night in their apartment with the river visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd said something like, "You're the calmest person I've ever met." And she'd laughed and said, "I'm the most anxious person you've ever met. I've just had a lot of practice not showing it." He'd found that funny at the time. He didn't find it funny now. What he found it now was devastating. "The table is ready," said one of his men at his shoulder. "Whenever you want to be seated." "In a moment," Tae-hyun said. He picked up a glass of champagne from a passing server's tray. He did not drink it. He held it, and he watched Amara move across the room toward the podium area, her earpiece in, her tablet in hand, doing her job with the particular efficiency that had always made him think she was the most quietly formidable person he'd ever encountered. She had built something without him. After everything he had done to her, she had walked away, and she had built something real and clean and her own. The champagne glass was cold in his hand. He set it down without drinking. "You're distracted," Yuna said beside him, and this time there was the faintest edge under the pleasantness. "The room is loud," he said. He let himself be guided to table 7. He sat. He performed the required social function of a man in his position at an event like this. Acknowledgements, brief exchanges, the particular brand of authority that expressed itself as gracious disinterest. He was very good at it. He had been doing it for 15 years. His eyes found Amara 6 more times in the next 40 minutes, and he was angry at himself each time. At 9:15 during the dinner service, his opportunity came in the form of logistics. He had excused himself from the table, a real reason, a call he genuinely needed to take. One of his operations managers with a situation developing in Incheon that required 30 seconds of decision-making. He handled it in the corridor outside the main ballroom entrance, kept the call under 2 minutes, and was walking back when he nearly collided with Amara, who was coming from the opposite direction with her tablet and her earpiece and her absolute focus on whatever she was managing. She saw him at the same moment he saw her. She stopped. He stopped. 3 feet of Korean Convention Center corridor between them. For a moment that lasted considerably longer than a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Amara said, "Mr. Kang, I hope the evening is meeting your expectations." Her voice was exactly the same as it had been across the ballroom, even, professional, giving away nothing. Event director to notable guest, clean and appropriate and utterly devastating. "Amara," he said. A very small thing moved across her face, so small that someone who hadn't spent years studying that face would have missed it entirely. Then it was gone. "The Patris has been arranged for your table," she said. "If there's anything else, don't," he said. She looked at him. The look was careful and composed and contained something underneath it that he couldn't read, which was new. He had always been able to read her. "Don't what?" she said. "Don't talk to me like I'm a guest." "You are a guest," she said. "That's what you are here tonight. You're a guest at an event I'm directing, and I'd appreciate it if we could both—" "I didn't know you were here," he said. "I didn't know this was your event." "Now you know," she said. "And everything is running smoothly, so there's no cause for concern." She moved to step past him. He didn't move to stop her. He didn't touch her, didn't reach out. But something in the way he stayed exactly where he was made her pause. "You look," he started. "Please don't," she said quietly. The professionalism had a hairline fracture in it, just one, just barely audible. "Please don't do that." He closed his mouth. She looked at him for one more second, something in her eyes that he recognized, not the softness of what they'd had, but the scar tissue that forms over a wound that went very deep and took a very long time to close. "Enjoy the rest of the evening," she said, and walked past him. He stood in the corridor for a moment after she'd gone. Then he went back to the table and he sat down, and Yuna immediately placed her hand over his and asked who he'd been speaking to, and he said, "Event staff," and picked up his fork. The lie was so smooth it frightened him. The remainder of the evening was a masterclass in professional conduct on Amara's part. She directed the gala's second half with the same precision she'd brought to the first. The live auction segment ran 2 minutes under schedule, which she absorbed by extending the musical interlude before the closing remarks. A technical failure with the projector during the presentation segment was addressed and resolved in under 90 seconds. A minor dispute between 2 competing executives over seating adjacency was dissolved with a brief, quiet conversation and a strategic relocation of a flower arrangement. She was everywhere she needed to be, and nowhere she didn't need to be, and she smiled at the guests who required smiling at, and she was firm with the staff who required firmness, and she ran the closing segment with precision that left the Foundation's director visibly relieved. At 11:40, the last guest was departing. The catering team was beginning the breakdown. Jisoo was compiling the post-event notes. Amara stood near the window on the far east side of the ballroom, the river far below them reflecting city lights, and she allowed herself 1 full minute to feel the physical exhaustion of a 13-hour event day. She became aware, without turning around, that someone was standing behind her. She turned. Taehyun had stayed. The ballroom was emptying, the last of the waitstaff moving through with collection trays, 2 of the security detail already by the exit, and he was standing 15 feet away with his jacket collar slightly loosened and his hands at his sides, and an expression on his face that she did not want to look at because she recognized it. Yuna was not with him. "Your assistant told me you'd be here until midnight," he said. "My assistant shouldn't have told you that. She didn't mean to. I asked her something and she gave me more context than she intended to." He paused. "She's loyal to you," she recovered quickly. "What do you want, Taehyun?" He crossed the distance between them slowly, as if he understood the importance of pace. He stopped 8 feet away. She noted the distance. She noted that he had stopped there deliberately. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said. The words landed the way she had always, in her lowest moments during those first terrible years, imagined they would. Quietly, without the drama she might have scripted in her head. Just words, delivered by a man standing in an emptying ballroom. She felt nothing like what she'd imagined she'd feel. "Okay," she said. He blinked. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't that. "Okay," she said again. "You've said it." "Amara, did you think I needed to hear it?" she asked. Not cruel, genuinely curious. "Is that what you thought would happen? You'd say it and something would—" She stopped, looked at the river, looked back at him. "I spent a long time needing to hear it. I don't need it anymore. I built something that doesn't need it." "I know I was wrong," he said. "I know what I did. I believed someone over you and I chose it, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. And I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I know." "Stop." Her voice was steady. "I need you to understand something. The woman who needed you to know that, she's gone. She didn't survive what you did to her. What you're looking at right now is someone who was built from what came after." She picked up her tablet from the windowsill. "Good night. I hope the Petrus was to your satisfaction." She walked toward the service corridor. "Where did you go?" he said behind her. "After. Where did you go?" She stopped. She didn't turn around. "Somewhere you couldn't find me," she said. She went through the door and let it close behind her. In the corridor out of his sight, she stood with her back against the wall and pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum and breathed. 1 breath, 2, 3, until the trembling in her chest subsided to something manageable. Then she straightened, checked her earpiece, went to find Jisoo. The breakdown took 2 more hours. She supervised until 12:50, confirmed the final vendor checkout, signed off on the catering reconciliation report, and sat in the car back to her office before allowing herself to think. Not about the conversation, not about his face when she'd walked away from him, about what she needed to do next. Her phone buzzed. Jisoo. A text. "Everything locked. Venue fully cleared. Final report pending morning review. Good work tonight." She typed back, "You too." Then she looked out the car window at the city sliding past. Lit windows, empty streets at this hour, the river visible for a moment between buildings, and she thought about her boys. Micah and Malik, 8 years old, asleep right now at her mother's apartment across town, probably in the same bed because they always migrated toward each other by midnight, even when they started the night on opposite sides of the room. They'd been doing that since they were infants. She used to stand in the doorway and watch them. These 2 little people who were so entirely themselves and so entirely hers. And think about how nothing that came before them mattered as much as what came after. She had been 28 when she found out she was pregnant. She had been sitting in a pharmacy at 2 in the morning with a test in her hand in the single-stall bathroom, while outside the pharmacy walls the city went on being a city. And she had been 4 months out from the worst night of her life. And she had looked at those 2 lines and understood with absolute and complete clarity that she had a choice to make. Not about the pregnancy. That wasn't the choice. She knew what she was going to do the moment she understood what the 2 lines meant. The choice was about who she was going to be now. She had chosen to be someone worth knowing, someone her sons could respect, someone who did not define herself by the wound another person had left. It had not been easy. Easy was not something she had ever been promised, and she hadn't wasted energy expecting it. She'd finished her professional certification while pregnant, delivered 2 healthy boys at 32 weeks because they were impatient even then, spent the first year in survival mode, spent the second year building the foundation of her firm, spent the third year actually running it, and somewhere in the 4th year she had stopped counting the years since him and started counting only the years since them. She was a mother. She was a businesswoman. She was the person who ran the room. She was not the woman who had stood in a hospital corridor 5 years ago at midnight, having been told by her husband in a phone call to get out of his life, and slid down the wall to the floor and made sounds she didn't know were possible. That woman was gone. Tae-hyun could apologize to a ghost, too. The car pulled up to her office building. She got out, thanked the driver, and went up to retrieve her things and finish the administrative closure on the evening. It was past 1 in the morning. She had a call at 7. She was reaching for her coat when Jisoo's name flashed on her phone again. Not a text this time. A call. Amara frowned. Jisoo did not call at 1 in the morning. Jisoo? I'm sorry. Jisoo's voice was careful. I'm sorry to call at this hour, and I know tonight was a lot. But I thought you should know. Know what? A pause. A woman approached me in the parking structure after I left the venue. She asked about you, about your firm, about how you knew Mr. Kang. I told her I didn't understand the question and walked away. But she'd done research. She knew your name, your company registration, your address here. She was asking about you personally. Amara was very still. What did she look like? Jisoo described her, the dress, the hair, the specific way she held herself like someone who expected to be looked at. Yuna Seo. Thank you for telling me, Amara said. Her voice was entirely even. Go home, Jisoo. Don't engage with her again if she approaches you. Are you okay? Good night, Amara said. She ended the call. She stood in her office with her coat in her hands and the city visible through the window and thought about what it meant that Yuna Seo had gone looking for information about her within 4 hours of seeing Taehyun's face in that corridor. It meant Yuna had seen something in Taehyun's expression or posture, or in the simple fact of a private conversation that she had not been included in. Something that had made a woman who operated in the world of the Black Phoenix Syndicate decide that Amara Bennett was worth investigating. That was not nothing. Amara put her coat on. She thought about Micah and Malik asleep across town, migrating toward each other in the dark. She thought about everything she had built, carefully, deliberately, over 5 years. She thought about how much a woman like Yuna Seo, with the resources she had access to, could find if she looked hard enough and in the right places. Then she thought about what Yuna would find in the public record, in the school enrollment forms, in the documents Amara had been meticulous about for 8 years. Was 2 boys with no father listed. But meticulous was not the same as invisible. And Yuna had resources. And there were things, genetics, photographs, the particular shape of a jaw that 2 small boys had inherited, that no paperwork could erase. Amara stood by the window for a long time. Then she turned off the office light, picked up her bag, and walked to the elevator. Whatever was coming, she would face it the way she faced everything, standing up. But somewhere in the city tonight, Yuna Seo was already making calls. And for the first time in 5 years, the sealed room inside Amara began to feel less like protection and more like a wall that someone was quietly beginning to measure. The call came at 6:53 in the morning, 7 minutes before Amara's alarm. She was already awake. She had been awake since 5, lying in the dark of her apartment with the ceiling above her and the particular quality of pre-dawn silence that made everything feel both very far away and very close. She had slept in pieces, 2 hours, then nothing, then 40 minutes, then nothing again. And somewhere around 4:30, she had stopped pretending and just lay there, thinking through contingencies the way she used to do in the early years when the boys were infants and sleep was a rumor and survival required planning every hour in advance. The phone said, "Mom." She answered it. "I was going to call at 7. "I know, I'm up." Her mother's voice dry and warm in equal measure, the voice of a woman who had raised a daughter alone and considered excessive softness a form of negligence. "Boys are awake. Malik found a cricket in my kitchen, and now there's a debate happening about whether we keep it. Tell him no." "I did. He's reconsidering. Micah is Switzerland." A pause. "How was last night?" "It went well," Amara said. Another pause, longer. Her mother had a specific silence for when she knew there was more and was deciding whether to ask. "You sound like you slept in a parking garage." "I'm fine." "Amara." "He was there," she said. "It was fine. I handled it." The silence on the other end had a different quality now, heavy and careful. "Did he see you?" "Yes." "Did he—" "Mom, I handled it." She sat up, pushed her feet to the floor. The apartment was cool. "I need to get ready. I'll pick the boys up at noon. Tell Malik the cricket goes outside." She ended the call before her mother could ask anything else, because her mother's questions were too accurate, and she didn't have the bandwidth this morning to navigate accurate questions. She stood in the shower for 7 minutes. She thought about Eunicio making calls in a car at midnight. She thought about what a woman with money and motivation and the full intelligence apparatus of the Black Phoenix Syndicate behind her could extract from the public record in 8 hours. She thought about school enrollment forms and medical records, and the particular challenge of having kept a secret for 8 years in a city where secrets had a way of being monetized. She thought about Micah asking her last week, the way he'd been asking with increasing frequency over the past year, why some of the kids at school had fathers who came to pick up and his didn't. She had given him the same answer she always gave. Some families look different, and ours is complete the way it is. And he had accepted it with the particular trust of a child who wasn't quite old enough yet to push back. But she could see it in him, the question forming below the surface, getting larger. She got out of the shower. She got dressed. She went to work. The office was a converted fourth-floor space in a mixed-use building in Mapogu, not impressive from the outside, which she had chosen deliberately. Inside it was efficient and calm, the kind of environment that communicated competence without performing it. 3 full-time staff members and a rotating roster of contractors. A reputation built over 4 years of word of mouth from clients who found that she delivered exactly what she promised and nothing less. She had a 7 o'clock debrief call with the Charity Foundation's director, who wanted to discuss the event outcomes, and she could hear it in his phrasing when he confirmed the call time the previous week, likely to discuss expanding the relationship to their spring fundraiser. She handled the call at her desk with coffee she'd made herself and notes open on her laptop, and the director said all the things she'd anticipated, and she responded to all of them the way she'd prepared to. And by 7:40, the call was done, and the spring fundraiser was a conversation they'd continue next week. Good. Normal. Work. Jisoo came in at 8 with a folder and an expression. The post-event report is drafted, and there's something else. Amara looked up. Jisoo set a printed page on the desk. Someone accessed our company registry filing this morning. It's public record, so it's not a breach. But I have a notification set up on our registration entry because 3 years ago, a competitor was scraping our client list, and the notification flagged an access at 2:17 this morning. 2:17. Which was approximately the time Eunicio would have gotten home from whatever conversation she'd had in that parking structure, poured herself a drink, and started making things happen. Thank you, Amara said. Keep monitoring it. Should I be concerned? Amara looked at the page. The access log showed a commercial intelligence query, the kind that law firms and investigative outfits use to pull corporate registration details, director names, registered addresses. Not yet, she said, but don't discuss our client list with anyone outside this office. If anyone asks about the gala, about the Kang booking, about anything related to last night, you come to me first. Jisoo was quiet for a moment. The woman from the parking structure. Yes, Amara said. She dangerous? Amara considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Eunicio was the companion of a man who ran the largest criminal syndicate in Korea. She was not dangerous the way a storm was dangerous. Random, impersonal, unreasoning. She was dangerous the way a structural calculation error was dangerous. Patient, invisible until the collapse. Just come to me first, Amara said. Jisoo left. Amara turned back to her screen and tried to work. She made it 40 minutes before her phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text from the same number. This is Kang Tae-hyun. I got your number from the Foundation's event contact sheet. I'd like to meet. Please. She stared at it for a long time. Then she put the phone face down on the desk and went back to work. He called again at 11. She didn't answer. He texted again at 11:40. I understand if you don't want to talk to me, but there are things I need to say, and I think you deserve to choose whether or not to hear them. I won't contact you again after this if you tell me not to. She read it twice. She put the phone back down. She thought, the woman who needed this doesn't exist anymore. She thought, then why does reading it feel like pressing on a bruise? She picked up her bag and went to get her sons. Micah and Malik had their mother's eyes and their own individual gravitational fields. At 8 years old, they were already unmistakably themselves. Micah quieter, more observational, the kind of child who sat in the corner of a room for 20 minutes before engaging and then engaged with a precision that startled adults. Malik louder, more immediate, made of enthusiasm and opinions, the kind of child who walked into a room and began participating before he'd fully cleared the door. They were identical in structure, same height, same jaw, same wide-set eyes, and completely different in execution. Amara's mother, a 71-year-old woman named Grace, who had the posture of someone who considered physical deference a form of surrender, handed the boys over in the lobby of her building with the particular efficiency of a woman who had things to do. "The cricket is in a jar on my windowsill," Grace said. Malik was very persuasive. "Mom, it's a jar. It has holes. It will be released into the wild in 48 hours. She looked at Amara in the direct way she always looked at Amara when she wanted to communicate something without saying it in front of the boys. "You look better than I expected." "I told you I was fine." "You did." Grace leaned down and kissed each boy on the top of the head. "Malik, the cricket gets a name but not a home. Micah, stop letting your brother run experiments in my kitchen." She straightened, looked at Amara again. One more second, then, "Call me tonight." She went back upstairs. Amara walked the boys to the car. Malik talked continuously about the cricket, whose name was apparently Gerald, and why Gerald deserved a proper terrarium and not just a jar, and Amara said, "We'll talk about Gerald later," which Malik correctly identified as a no, but chose not to escalate. Micah climbed into the back seat, buckled himself, and looked out the window. 3 blocks into the drive, Micah said, "Mom." "Are you okay?" She glanced in the rearview mirror. He was still looking out the window, but she knew he was watching her reflection in it. He'd been doing that since he was 5. "I'm good, baby. Tired from work last night." "Was it a good event?" "It was a very good event." A pause. "The one at that big building by the river?" She was careful. "Yes." "Why?" Another pause, longer. "I saw a picture," Micah said, "on the news app on Grandma's tablet this morning. Of the gala, there was a picture of some people arriving." Amara's hands were steady on the wheel. "Okay." "There was a man," Micah said, "in a black suit. He had—" A pause that was too long for a casual observation. "He had a face kind of like mine, a little bit." Malik stopped talking about Gerald. The back seat went quiet. Amara drove. The light ahead was green. She kept her eyes on it. "Lots of people have similar faces," she said. Her voice came out even. She did not know how. "Yeah," Micah said. He didn't say anything else, but she felt it in the car, the particular weight of a question that hadn't been asked yet, but was close. She drove. Taehyun, at that same hour, was in the middle of a meeting he was not fully present for. The conference room on the 38th floor of the Black Phoenix headquarters occupied a corner of the building that looked east and south, and on a clear day you could see the river from both windows. Today was clear. He'd been looking at the river for most of the past 40 minutes, while 3 of his senior operations directors discussed a situation involving a territorial dispute with a Busan-based organization that had been testing the southern boundary of Black Phoenix's distribution network for the past 6 weeks. He knew the situation. He had been briefed on it 3 times. He understood every dimension of it, and he had, in the past, been the person in this room who moved the fastest and most decisively on situations exactly like this one. Right now he was thinking about the corridor outside the ballroom. The way Amara had said, "Somewhere you couldn't find me." Taehyun. Director Shin, his longest-serving operations head, a man who had been with him for 12 years and who communicated discomfort by going very slightly more formal than usual. The Busan situation. Push back on the southern boundary. Full resource deployment. Make it visible. Don't engage unless they initiate. He said it without looking away from the window. They're testing the edge. Show them there is no edge to test. Silence. Then Shin, quietly. "Yes, and the secondary question. The Incheon transfer schedule. Move it up 2 days. Reroute through Gimpo." More silence. The kind that meant the people in the room had expected a longer conversation and were recalibrating. "That's all," Taehyun said. "I need the room." They filed out. Shin was last. At the door, he paused. "You have the alliance dinner with the Choi family on Thursday," he said. "I know." Another pause. "Should I ask if everything is all right?" "No," Taehyun said. Shin left. Taehyun sat in the empty conference room and looked at the river and thought about a woman standing at a window the night before, looking at that same water, and he thought about how many times he'd imagined what it would feel like to see her again, and how completely wrong every version of it had been. He had expected anger. He had, in the scenarios he'd constructed in low moments, braced for it. The confrontation, the accusations, the grief expressed as fury. He had deserved that. He had been prepared to absorb it. What he had not been prepared for was calm, not the brittle calm of someone suppressing anger, genuine calm. The calm of someone who had processed something completely and come out the other side and left him behind in the processing. He picked up his phone and looked at the last text he'd sent her. No response. He hadn't expected one. He set the phone down and thought about what she'd said. The woman who trusted him died. What you're looking at right now is someone who was built from what came after. His intercom buzzed. His assistant's voice. Ms. Seo is here. She says it's not scheduled, but it's important. He was quiet for a moment. Send her in. Yuna came in the way she always came in, like she'd rehearsed the entrance, which she probably had, because Yuna understood presentation as a form of leverage. She was dressed differently from the previous evening, casual but calculated, and she sat down across from him without being invited to and set her phone on the table face up, which was something she only did when she wanted him to know she had something on it worth looking at. I did some research last night, she said. I know you did, he said. A pause. She recalibrated. She'd expected that to land differently. The event director. Yuna. Amara Bennett. American. Dual residency. Naturalized Korean resident status. Her company has been operating for 4 years. Before that, she did freelance coordination work. Yuna's voice was even, but underneath it he could hear the things she was working to control. She's good at what she does. I'm sure she is. She also has children. Yuna looked at him with the particular directness of someone making sure they have your complete attention. Twin boys, 8 years old. Something moved through his chest. Very quiet. Very fast. He kept his face completely still. A lot of people have children, he said. The birth records list no father. She held his gaze. I thought that was interesting. That's a personal matter for someone you have no relationship with, he said. His voice had no inflection in it. No inflection was its own kind of inflection, and Yuna heard it. I'm not trying to cause problems, she said, and they both knew that was not true. I just noticed, last night you stopped walking when you saw her. I've been with you for 2 years, and I've never seen you stop walking when you entered a room. And then you were in the corridor with her for Yuna. She stopped. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and looked at her with the expression he used in rooms where the decision had already been made and the conversation was a formality. You went to the parking structure after the event. You approached my staff. Her jaw tightened. I asked a question. You used the syndicate's name to run a registration query at 2 a.m. on a private citizen. I used my own. You used resources that exist because of your association with me, he said, and you directed them at someone who has done nothing to warrant your attention. That ends now. He sat back. I want to be clear with you, because I think clarity is better than anything else I could offer you in this moment. Whatever you found, or think you found, or plan to look for, you stop. Today. Yuna sat very still. Something in her face had gone tight, and he could see her managing it. The calculation happening in real time. The weighing of what she could push back against and what she couldn't. Who is she? Yuna said, quietly. Just tell me who she is. Someone I knew a long time ago, he said. How long? He didn't answer. Yuna looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone from the table. The boys, she said. If you had to guess, how old would you say they'd need to be for there to be any possibility? Get out, he said. Not loud, not aggressive, completely final. Yuna stood up. She smoothed her jacket. She walked to the door and she stopped with her hand on the frame, and she said, without turning around, I'm not going to stop caring about what happens to you just because you're angry with me. I know, he said. Leave. She left. Taehyun sat in the empty room for a long time. 8 years old, twin boys. He thought about the math in the way that a person thinks about something they do not want to think about. Sideways, obliquely, approaching it and backing away from it. He and Amara had been together for 2 years before it fell apart. She had left, No, he had made her leave. He had to keep the language accurate with himself. She had not left. He had expelled her. He had believed someone over her and chosen someone else's account of events over the evidence of 2 years of knowing her. And that had been, he counted backward, which he hated himself for doing, that had been 8.5 years ago. 8.5 years. Twin boys, 8 years old, with no father listed on the birth record. He stood up. He walked to the window. He looked at the river. He thought about the look on Amar's face in the ballroom corridor when he'd said her name. Not surprise. Not anger. Something much more controlled than either of those things. The specific expression of someone who has long since anticipated a moment and prepared for it completely. And the preparation itself is a kind of armor. She had prepared for seeing him. She had been ready. He thought about why someone would need to be that ready. He picked up his phone. He pulled up the contact he'd used this morning to find her number. A favor called in with the Foundation's administrative director, who owed him several much larger ones. He considered what he was about to do. He called his intelligence director instead, a man named Bay, who had worked for him for 9 years and who had never once asked why a task was requested and never once failed to complete one. "I need a full background on Amara Bennett," he said. "Complete life history from the point she left Korea 8 years ago. Every address, every record, every document of record. And—" He stopped. He breathed. He finished. "Any information pertaining to her children." A pause on the other end, just half a beat. "Timeline? 48 hours," he said. 72 at most. And Bay. Another pause. "This comes to me directly. Only me." Understood. He ended the call. He stood at the window. He thought about Amara saying, "The woman who trusted him died." He thought about her saying, "Somewhere you couldn't find me." He thought about 2 boys, 8 years old, who had no father on their paperwork. And he thought about the particular way that a man's life can appear completely intact, successful, powerful, feared, constructed with immense deliberateness over decades, and still be built entirely on the wrong foundation. He pressed his palm against the cold glass. Outside, 40 stories below, Seoul moved through its afternoon the way cities do. Indifferent, continuous, unimpressed by the specific catastrophes of specific people. 1,000 intersecting lives, 1,000 quiet disasters held together with composure and routine. Somewhere in this city, Amara Bennett was picking up her sons from their grandmother's apartment. Somewhere in this city, Uniso was already making another call. And in a file that Bay would compile over the next 48 hours, a set of facts were assembling themselves. Dates and records and photographs, and the particular biological truth that 2 boys carry in the structure of their faces, whether anyone intends them to or not. And those facts, once read, could not be unread. The city moved. The river reflected it all back, slow and indifferent, the way it always had. Taehyun did not move from the window for a very long time, because some part of him understood, without yet being able to name it fully, that the life he would be living in 72 hours was going to be irrevocably different from the one he was living now, and he was not yet ready to step into it. But the file was already being compiled, and ready had stopped being an option the moment he walked through those ballroom doors and saw her standing on the other side of the room, perfectly composed, perfectly whole, building something beautiful in a life that had no room in it for him. And somewhere in that beautiful life, 2 boys with his jaw and her eyes were growing up without a name for the space their father should have occupied. The file arrived in 71 hours. Bay did not send it electronically. He brought it in person, which was itself a communication, a physical folder, printed, no digital trail, delivered by hand to Taehyun's private office on a Wednesday morning while the rest of the floor was in a scheduled operations review that Taehyun had excused himself from without explanation. Bay set it on the desk and stood back and said nothing, because Bay understood that some information required space around it. "Anything I should know before I open it?" Taehyun said. Bay considered the question with the seriousness of a man who had delivered difficult intelligence before and understood the difference between preparing someone and softening something that could not be softened. "The documentation is complete," he said, "and consistent." Taehyun looked at the folder. It was maybe 30 pages. Not thick. 30 pages was enough to contain an entire life, apparently, or at least the portion of a life that intersected with his. "Leave," he said. Bei left. Taehyun did not open the folder immediately. He stood behind his desk with his hands at his sides and looked at it for a moment. Just a folder, manila, the kind that contained invoices or contracts or quarterly reports on any other morning. And he thought about the last 71 hours. He had worked. He had conducted his business with the full mechanical competence of someone who had learned long ago to separate function from feeling. And the Black Phoenix Syndicate had moved through its week without disruption, because he had made sure of it. The Busan situation had been resolved. 2 boundary incursions met with a response that was measured enough to avoid escalation and severe enough to communicate that there would not be a third. The Incheon transfer had been rerouted without incident. He had attended a dinner on Thursday with the Choi family alliance that required 3 hours of sustained social performance, and he had delivered it. He had not contacted Amara again. He had not returned Yuna's calls. There had been 3 of them, each one more careful and controlled than the last, which told him she was recalibrating rather than retreating. He had slept badly. This was not unusual. He had slept badly for years. He opened the folder. The first section was biographical. Addresses, employment records, the professional history he had largely already known or inferred. He moved through it quickly. The freelance years after she'd left Korea, a period of 8 months in London. Then Atlanta, where she had family. The certification she had completed. The return to Seoul 4 years ago. The second section was the business documentation. Clean, successful by any reasonable standard. A company that had grown steadily from a one-person operation to a small firm with genuine market presence. He noted the clients without letting himself dwell on what it meant that she had built this without resources, without the network his name would have provided, without anything except her own capability. He turned to the third section. It was shorter than he expected. 2 pages and 3 photographs. The first photograph was a school enrollment photograph, the kind taken at the beginning of an academic year, small and slightly formal. 2 boys in school uniforms seated side by side in front of a plain background. They were smiling in the way that children smile for school photographs, which is to say, imperfectly and therefore completely genuinely. Taehyun looked at the photograph. He set it down very carefully on the desk. He sat down. He picked it up again. The boys, Micah and Malik, the names were in the documentation, Micah Kang Bennett and Malik Kang Bennett. She had given them his name in the middle. She had done that. She had given his name to his sons while he was living his life without any knowledge that they existed. The boys had her eyes. Her exact eyes, the shape and the quality of attention in them, even at 8 years old, the same focused watchfulness that had made him fall for her in the first place. But the jaw, the angle of the cheekbone, the particular set of the brow, that was him. That was entirely him. He had looked at his own face in the mirror for 38 years and he knew every dimension of it, and what he was looking at in this school photograph were 2 8-year-old versions of features he had been carrying his entire life. He set the photograph down again. He became aware that he was breathing harder than normal. He became aware that his hands were not entirely steady. He became aware of a sound that was not coming from anywhere in the room, but seemed to be coming from somewhere inside his chest. Not pain exactly. Something worse than pain, something that didn't have a clean name. The sound a structure makes when a load-bearing element fails. He turned to the second photograph. It was candid, taken at distance, the kind of photograph that surveillance work produced. No awareness from the subjects that they were being documented. A park. A riverside park. The kind that Seoul had in abundance. Grass and paths, and the river in the background. Amara was sitting on a bench and both boys were in front of her, and she was laughing at something one of them had said, and the photograph had captured her mid-laugh in a way that studio photography never could. Unguarded, real. The face of someone who was completely present in a moment with no performance in it. He had not seen her laugh in 8 years. He had forgotten, somehow, despite everything, what it looked like. He closed the folder. He sat at his desk in his private office with the folder closed in front of him and the city visible through the window behind him, and he did not move for a long time. His sons were 8 years old. He had missed 8 years. He had been here, in this city, running his empire and attending his dinners and winning his territorial disputes and sleeping badly in his expensive apartment And across this same city, in the same weather and under the same sky, two boys who were his had been growing up without him. Because he had believed a lie. Because someone had told him something, and he had chosen to believe it over the evidence of everything he actually knew about Amara. And he had made a decision in a single night that had cost his sons their father and cost him. He could not yet calculate what it had cost him. The number was too large to hold. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He picked it up again. He called Bay. The source of the original accusation, he said, 8 years ago. The information that led to the dissolution of my marriage. He said the last part with the clinical distance of a man describing a business outcome he needed to review. I want that file as well, full reconstruction. Who brought it, who sourced it, and whether it was verified before I acted on it. A pause. That's a significant excavation, Bay said carefully. I'm aware. Do it. He ended the call. Then he sat with the truth for a few more minutes. Just sat with it. Because running from it or toward it without sitting with it first was how men made consecutive catastrophic errors, and he had already made enough of those. His sons were 8 years old. He had a folder with their school photograph in it. He was going to do what came next correctly, or he was going to deserve everything that came after. Amara was running a vendor call when the message came through. She was at her office desk, laptop open, half-eaten lunch pushed to the side, walking a floral supplier through a discrepancy in the quote for a corporate event scheduled for late October. It was a normal Wednesday. She had been having a normal Wednesday with deliberate intention, work, logistics, the reassuring structure of professional problems that had professional solutions. And she had almost managed to spend 6 consecutive hours not thinking about the previous weekend. Her phone, face up on the desk because she was waiting on a client callback, lit with a message. Not Tae Hyun's number. A number she didn't recognize, but the area code was Seoul, and the message was 2 sentences. My name is Bae Jun-seo. I work for Kang Tae-hyun, and I'm calling on his behalf regarding a matter of significant personal importance. Please call this number when you're available. She looked at the message. She finished the vendor call. She sat at her desk for a moment. Then she called Jisoo in and said, I need 20 minutes. Hold everything. Jisoo, who had developed a talent over 2 years for reading the specific register of Amara's composure, simply said, yes, and closed the door. Amara did not call the number. Instead, she called her mother. Grace answered on the second ring, which meant she was near her phone, which meant she had been expecting contact. Her mother had a talent for that. An anticipatory readiness that Amara had found inexplicable as a child, and now recognized as the particular vigilance of a woman who had never been able to fully relax because the world had given her insufficient reason to. He ran a background check, Amara said. A silence. You know this? Someone from his office just contacted me, officially, which means whatever they found, he's already seen it. She kept her voice low and even. Which means he knows. Another silence, longer. Then Grace said, How much time do you have? I don't know yet. The boys are at school, Amara said, until 3:15. What do you need from me? She thought about that. What did she need? She needed time. Not much time, just enough to think this through properly, to get ahead of it rather than behind it. She needed to understand what he intended to do with what he knew before she made any decisions. She needed her sons to come home at 3:15 and eat their after-school snack and argue about whose turn it was to choose a show and be entirely ordinary for as long as possible. Nothing yet, she said. I'll call you tonight. She ended the call. She looked at the message from Bay for another moment. Then she opened a new text to the number and typed, I'm available at 5 o'clock. I'll come to you. She hit send before she could reconsider the phrasing. Coming to him was a choice. It removed the vulnerability of being found, being approached, being in a space that felt like waiting. She would not wait. She had not waited for anything in 8 years, and she was not starting now. The address that came back was not the Black Phoenix headquarters. It was an address in Seongdong-gu, a quieter district, commercial on the ground floor, but the upper levels used for private offices and residential space. The kind of address that suggested a meeting of personal rather than organizational business. She texted the address to Jisoo with a note that said, I'll be here from 5 to approximately 6. If I don't check in by 6:30, call this number. Jisu's reply came back in under a minute. Understood. Be safe. Amara put her phone in her bag and went back to work. She picked up her sons at 3:15. She walked them to the small park near the school, the way she did on days when the weather allowed it. And Malik ran ahead, and Micah walked beside her with the particular measured pace of a child who had learned from somewhere, from her, she knew it was from her, that walking beside someone was a form of companionship that didn't require constant talking. She put her hand on his shoulder for a moment, and he leaned into it slightly without breaking stride. At 4:40, she dropped them at her mother's. Grace met them at the door and did not ask any questions in front of the boys. Amara left. She found the address at 4:58 and spent 2 minutes in the car composing herself. Not calming down, she was already calm, but organizing the calm into something structural, something that would hold under pressure. She checked her face in the visor mirror. She looked like herself. That was sufficient. She went in. The office was on this 4th floor. Clean, spare, the kind of space that functioned rather than impressed. Bay was a compact man in his late 40s with a face that had been trained over years to give away nothing, and he met her at the door and said, "Thank you for coming. He's inside," and stepped aside. Taehyun was standing at the window when she entered. He turned when she came in. She had prepared herself for this. She had spent 4 hours preparing for this specific moment. His face, the room, whatever he was going to say, and the preparation held for approximately 2 seconds. Then she saw his eyes. She had never, in 2 years of marriage, in all the arguments and all the silences and all the moments that a marriage contains, seen that expression on his face. She didn't have a word for it immediately. It took her a moment. The word she realized was undone. Kang Tae-hyun, who ran an empire, who had never shown her anything but complete control of his own internal weather, looked completely undone. She stayed by the door. "Sit down," he said. His voice was different, not weak. The voice was still his voice, still that register, but stripped of something. The professional lacquer was gone. "I'm fine standing," she said. He nodded. He turned back to the window briefly, then back to her. "I had my intelligence director compile a file." "I know." A pause. "You know." "Someone accessed our company registration the morning after the gala," she said. "I know who ordered it. I assumed the rest was a matter of when, not if." She watched his face. "What did the file tell you?" He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful in the way that very precise people are careful when they understand that the words matter more than anything else in the room. "It told me the boys are 8 years old," he said. "It told me their middle name." He stopped. "It told me I've been in this city while they grew up in this city and I didn't know." The room was very quiet. "You didn't know," Amara said, "because I chose not to tell you." "I understand that." "Do you?" "Yes," he said. "I understand why." He said it with the weight of someone who has spent 71 hours understanding something, and arrived at the understanding not through mercy toward himself, but through a clear-eyed accounting of what he'd done to earn it. Amara looked at him. "Then what do you want from this conversation?" "The truth," he said, "the complete truth. Not because I have a right to it. I understand that I gave up the right to most things when I did what I did, but because I need to understand everything that I caused before I can even begin to think about what to do now." A long silence. "Fine," she said. She moved from the door, not toward him, to the chair at the side of the room, where she sat with her back straight and her hands in her lap, and looked at him with the expression that he now recognized as her armor. "Ask? Were you pregnant when I told you to leave?" The question was direct, and it landed directly. She absorbed it. "No," she said. "I found out 6 weeks later." Something moved across his face. 6 weeks. "I was in Atlanta, at my mother's. I took a test in a pharmacy at 2 in the morning." She said it evenly. This was her story, and she had earned the right to tell it without performing it. "I didn't contact you." "Why?" "Because you had made it very clear what you believed about me, and I had no interest in having my children connected to someone who thought that little of me." The word children landed in the room with a specific weight, the first time she had used it. His jaw tightened slightly. "I also considered what their lives would look like, the children of a woman you'd thrown out, and a man who ran an organization like yours. I made a choice. You should have told me. She looked at him. You told me to get out of your life, she said. You told me you had evidence that I had betrayed you and that you would never forgive me and that you wanted no contact from me again. You said those words. A pause. Which of them was I supposed to interpret as an invitation to call you and tell you I was pregnant? He didn't answer. There was no answer. The evidence, he said instead. I'm having it reconstructed. What was told to me about you? I know what was told to you. He looked at her. I know who told you, she said. Her voice had shifted, not louder, but denser, something compressed into it. I know because I spent 2 years trying to understand how the man I knew became someone who could do what you did in a single night without asking me a single question. And I found it. She looked at her hands, then back at him. I just didn't do anything with it, because doing something with it would have meant staying connected to all of this, and I was done. He was very still. Who? She considered not telling him. She looked at his face and considered the geometry of what happened if she told him, versus what happened if she didn't. And she thought about her sons coming home at 3:15 to her mother's apartment, and she thought about Eunice Seo in a parking structure at midnight asking Jisoo questions. Her name at the time was Park Soo-jin, Amara said. She worked in your organization's financial division. You trusted her because she'd been there 6 years, and she'd never given you reason not to. She paused. She was also having a private arrangement with the head of the Choi family, who wanted you destabilized. Specifically, she was paid to create a situation that would cause you personal disruption significant enough to affect your focus on the territorial negotiation happening that year. She fabricated communications, she manufactured evidence, and you saw what she showed you and you didn't check it. The last sentence was the only one with anything under it. Just slightly, just enough. You didn't check it. The silence that followed was total. Taehyun had not moved. He was standing exactly where he had been standing. His face had the quality of a very controlled demolition, something coming apart in a sequence too fast to stop and too organized to be accidental. She's still in the organization, Amara said. A different division, more senior now. He turned away from her, went to the window. She watched his back. She watched him put one hand on the frame of the window, and she watched that hand tighten, and she watched him breathe. I need you to leave, he said. His voice was entirely controlled, and she knew, because she knew this man, that the control was costing him everything he had. Taehyun, please. The word came out with everything stripped from it, raw and simple. I need a moment, please. She stood. She picked up her bag. She walked to the door and she stopped. The boys don't know about you, she said. Micah is starting to ask questions. I have some time, but not unlimited time. She paused. Whatever you decide to do with what you know, I need you to understand that they come first. Not you, not me, not whatever this is between us. Them first. She left. In the corridor, she walked to the elevator and pressed the button and stood waiting for it with her arms at her sides and her face completely still. And when the elevator came, she stepped in and the doors closed and she was alone and she pressed her back against the rear wall and closed her eyes. She had not planned on telling him about Park Soo-jin. She did not know, even now, if it had been the right decision. What she knew was that somewhere above her, Kang Tae-hyun was standing at a window with the knowledge that his marriage had been destroyed deliberately, that his sons had grown up without him deliberately, and that the woman who had engineered it had been sitting inside his organization for 8 years, growing more senior and more trusted. And Kang Tae-hyun, she knew from 2 years of watching how he operated, did not leave betrayals unaddressed, which meant that Park Soo-jin's careful 8-year arrangement was about to end, which meant that Park Soo-jin, when she felt the walls closing, would do what cornered people always did. She would find something to use. The elevator reached the ground floor. Amara walked out into the evening air and found her car and sat in it for a moment before starting the engine, thinking about what it meant that she had just handed Tae-hyun the name of the woman who had destroyed them, and thinking about all the ways that a woman like that, with 8 years of intelligence access and no clean exits, might choose to fight back. Her phone lit. A text from her mother. Boys are asking when you're coming. Malik says Gerald needs feeding before bed. She looked at the text for a moment, then she started the car. She drove toward her son's. Behind her, in a fourth-floor office in Seongdong-gu, Tae-hyun stood at the window with his hand against the glass. And somewhere across the city, Park Soo-jin was finishing her Wednesday, completely unaware that the architecture of her carefully maintained secret had just been handed to the one person in Seoul with both the motive and the means to bring the entire structure down. And the further terrible fact, still assembling itself in Amara's mind as she drove through evening traffic toward her boys, was that Yoona Seo had been conducting her own investigation for 3 days now. And a woman who operated the way Yoona operated did not stop when told to stop. She simply stopped being visible about it, and whatever Yoona had already found or was close to finding was now moving on a parallel track to everything else. And tracks that ran parallel long enough had a way of eventually converging at a point where there was no longer room for everyone to walk away clean. Park Soo-jin felt it before she saw it. That was the thing about working inside an organization like the Black Phoenix Syndicate for 8 years. You developed an instinct for atmospheric pressure, for the specific quality of silence that preceded something moving in your direction. She had cultivated that instinct deliberately because she understood that in this world, the people who survived longest were the ones who felt the shift before it arrived. She felt it on Thursday morning. She was at her desk in the financial analysis division. She had moved up 3 times in 8 years, and her current role gave her access to the kind of cross-organizational data that she had originally been placed to provide. Though the arrangement with the Choi family had quietly dissolved years ago, the way arrangements like that always did, outlasting their usefulness and then simply ceasing without formal conclusion. She had kept the information she'd used against Amara Bennett filed in a place that existed only in her memory, because people who kept physical records of things like that were people who eventually got found. Thursday morning, 2 of her colleagues were pulled into separate meetings they hadn't been scheduled for. Thursday afternoon, she noticed that her system access had a half-second delay. It hadn't had the previous day. Not a crash. Not a malfunction. A half-second delay. The kind that happened when someone had inserted a monitoring layer between her credentials and the server. She kept her face completely still and finished her work and went home and sat in her apartment for a long time thinking about what it meant. What it meant was that Kang Tae-hyun knew. The question was how much and from where, and whether the gap between what he knew and what he could prove was wide enough to give her options. She thought about the gaps. She thought about what she still had. And then she thought about the thing she had held in reserve for 8 years, not because she'd planned to use it, but because discarding it had seemed premature. And premature discarding of leverage was how careful people became careless. She made a call. Tae-hyun moved through Thursday with the economy of a man who had identified a threat and was resolving it with the full weight of a decade-built infrastructure. He did not confront Park Soo-jin directly. Direct confrontation was for situations where speed mattered more than completeness. This situation required completeness. Bae had pulled her full file by Wednesday night. What it contained was worse than Tae-hyun had anticipated, not in scope, but in precision. The fabrication 8 years ago had been meticulous, the kind of careful construction that took weeks, maybe months, to build. Manufactured communications, a falsified timeline, a witness account from someone who had since left the country. All of it designed specifically for him, for the way he processed information, for the particular vulnerability of a man who trusted internal intelligence implicitly because he had built the intelligence apparatus himself. She had known him well enough to know how to destroy him, and he had given her that knowledge by trusting her. He sat with that on Wednesday night and let it be what it was. On Thursday, he began dismantling her access points methodically, quietly, so that by the time she understood what was happening, the exits would be closed. Bae managed the technical dimensions. Tae-hyun managed the human ones, 3 separate conversations, brief, held in locations that would not be monitored, with people who occupied critical positions in the organization's communication structure. He had not spoken to Amara since the meeting in Seongdong-gu. He had thought about calling her. He had not called her because he did not yet have anything to offer except the information that he was taking care of the problem she had given him. And he understood, with a clarity that surprised him with its completeness, that what Amara needed from him was not information or reassurance. What she needed was for him to be the kind of man who did not require her management. He was working on becoming that man. It was not a fast process. Yoona called again on Thursday afternoon. He answered this time. "I need to see you," she said. Her voice was flat. The performance was gone from it. "Not today," he said. "It's important." "Most things are. Not today." A pause. "I found something," she said, "about the Bennett woman. About her children. Tae-hyun, I need you to hear." "So stop." His voice was absolutely level. "Whatever you found, wherever you found it, you're done with this. Do you understand me?" "You don't know what—" "I know everything," he said. "I have known since Wednesday morning, and I am telling you now, clearly, that if you use anything you found to approach Amara Bennett or her children, I will consider it a direct action against my family. Do you understand what I mean when I say that?" The silence on her end was long. "Your family," she said. Very quiet. "Yes," he said. Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Something had gone out of it. Something that might have been hope or might have been strategy, and he couldn't tell which. "When were you going to tell me?" "I'm telling you now, stay away from them." He ended the call. He sat for a moment with the phone in his hand and thought about the word he had used, family, and what it meant that it had come out without deliberation, without construction, simply the accurate word for what was true. His sons were in a school in this city right now. He needed to finish what he'd started with Park Soo-jin before that fact became anything other than private. Park Soo-jin moved first on Friday morning. She had spent Thursday night making her calculations. She understood that her access was being curtailed, that the monitoring had deepened, that the window for clean exits was narrowing by the hour. She understood that Tae-hyun was building a case rather than moving immediately, which meant he wanted something airtight, which meant he was not operating from emotion, which was actually the more dangerous version of him. She had one piece of leverage remaining, one thing that changed the geometry of the situation if deployed correctly. She had the original documentation, not a copy. The original fabricated file, the communications, the falsified witness statement, all of it. She had kept it because destroying evidence was irrevocable, and irrevocability was something she had always been cautious about. She also had something else, something she had not anticipated having when she'd constructed the original operation 8 years ago, but that had come to her attention 3 days ago through a contact who monitored certain investigative queries on the commercial registry. Someone connected to the Kang organization had pulled records on Amara Bennett, and anyone paying attention to Amara Bennett for more than 48 hours would find what Soo-jin had found when she'd done her own research on Thursday night, motivated by a professional instinct that told her knowing everything about the variables in play was never wasted. 2 boys, 8 years old, Micah and Malik Kang Bennett. She understood immediately what this meant and what it was worth. She made contact with the one person who she knew wanted this information and had the standing to use it in ways she didn't, Yoona Seo. The meeting between them lasted 22 minutes, held in the lobby of a hotel in Jung-gu. 2 women at a table who had nothing in common except an inventory of things they each wanted preserved and a shared understanding that the man they were both, in different ways, trying to influence was currently beyond either of their reaches. Soo-jin offered the documentation, all of it, the evidence of what she had done 8 years ago. Yoona stared at her. "Why would you give me that?" "Because if Tae-hyun gets it from his intelligence director, it ends my career in this organization and potentially my freedom," Soo-jin said. "If it comes from you to him directly, you have a negotiating position. He can't move against me without your cooperation, and you can make cooperation conditional." Yoona was quiet for a moment. She was smart. Soo-jin had counted on that. Smart enough to see the structure of what was being offered. "What do you want out of it?" "Safe passage," Soo-jin said. "A clean exit. He lets me leave the organization without consequence, and you advocate for that as the condition of your cooperation." Yoona looked at her for a long moment. "And the children? The Bennett woman?" "That's your business," Soo-jin said. "Not mine." The meeting ended. Soo-jin left first. What Soo-jin had not calculated, because she was meticulous but not omniscient, was that Tae-hyun had anticipated that a cornered person would seek alternative leverage, and that Yoona was the most available recipient for it. He had a contact watching Yoona's movements. The contact reported the hotel meeting within 40 minutes of it ending. Taehyun read the report in his car outside the Black Phoenix headquarters and understood immediately what had happened and what was coming. He had 2 hours, maybe 3, before Yuna moved. He made one call. To Amara's number. She answered on the 3rd ring. What? How fast can you get to your sons? A beat of silence that contained everything. They're in school. What happened? Park Soo-jin made contact with Yuna this morning, he said. Yuna now has documentation that confirms the boys' parentage. I don't believe Yuna would harm them, but I don't know what she'll do with the information, and I don't want you caught off guard. The silence on her end was short. When she came back, her voice was stripped completely clean. No texture, no warmth, just the sound of a person processing rapidly. How long do I have? I'm managing it, but I want them somewhere you control before anything moves. I'm leaving now. A sound, keys, movement, a door. Fix this, Taehyun. The call ended. He looked at his phone for 1 second. Then he told his driver to move. Amara pulled Micah and Malik from school at 11:47 on a Friday morning. She had called ahead, a family emergency. She had used those words without elaboration, and the school administrator who had known her for 3 years had processed the request without friction. She walked into the school and she walked out with both boys, one on each side, and she did not let herself show them anything except calm. Malik immediately wanted to know if everything was okay. Everything's fine, she said. Change of plans today. Did something happen? Micah said beside her, his voice measured in the particular way he had when he was reading her closely. We're going to Grandma's, she said. Early lunch. She got them to her mother's apartment in 18 minutes. Her mother opened the door before she knocked. Grace had been watching from the window and took in the scene with a single look and immediately redirected the boys toward the kitchen with the promise of food, which worked on Malik instantly and worked on Micah 30 seconds later when he assessed the room and determined that whatever was happening, the adults were handling it. In the kitchen doorway, Grace turned back to Amara. Talk, Grace said quietly. Not yet, Amara said. Keep them here. Don't open the door for anyone you don't know. Amara, I'll be back in 2 hours. She kissed her mother on the cheek quickly. Lock the door. She left. The confrontation did not happen where Taehyun had planned it. He had intended to reach Yuna before she could deploy what Soo-jin had given her, to intercept the documentation, to shut the sequence down before it reached anyone outside the people already inside it. He had sent Bae ahead to Yuna's apartment building, and he was 6 minutes behind. Yuna was not at her apartment. She was at Amara's office. She had moved faster than he'd modeled, which told him she had anticipated the interception and changed her approach accordingly, and the fact that she'd thought that fast under that kind of pressure told him he had underestimated her for 2 years in a specific way. Amara arrived at her office at 12:31 and found Yuna Seo in the lobby, not upstairs, not having pushed past the front desk, standing in the lobby with a folder in her hand and the expression of someone who has decided that the cost of hesitation outweighs the cost of action. They looked at each other across the lobby. Jisoo was at the front desk, standing very still, the kind of stillness that meant she was frightened but not showing it. The 2 other people in the lobby, a courier, a building tenant, had gone quiet in the way that strangers go quiet when they sense something happening between 2 people that is not their business. I came here because I thought you deserved to hear this from a person, Yuna said, not from a message, not from someone else. Amara said, Jisoo, can you give us the lobby, please? Jisoo moved everyone out. 30 seconds and the lobby was empty except for the 2 of them. Amara did not move closer to Yuna. She stayed where she was, 10 feet back, because 10 feet gave her time to read whatever was coming. I know about the boys, Yuna said. I know they're his. I have documentation that proves what was done to your marriage. Who did it, how it was done. All of it. She held up the folder. Park Soo-jin came to me with it. I know, Amara said. Yuna blinked. You know. He called me this morning, Amara said. I know everything you just told me. Something shifted in Yuna's face. She had constructed this approach with a specific shape in mind, and the shape no longer fit. She recalibrated. Then you know that I could take this to anyone, she said. The media. The Choi family's remaining contacts. Anyone who has a reason to use it against him. Against your children. Is that a threat? Amara's voice was completely even. It's a reality, Yuna said. No, Amara said. It's a question. You're asking me what I'll do or what he'll do or how this resolves, and you're framing it as a statement because you think it sounds stronger. She looked at Yuna, not with contempt, with a kind of clear-eyed directness that was in some ways harder to receive than contempt. What do you actually want, Yuna? The question landed differently than Yuna had expected anything in this conversation to land. I want... She stopped. You want him, Amara said. You've wanted him for 2 years, and you're standing here with a folder because you think it gives you something to trade. A pause. But you already know, if you're honest with yourself, that he made a call this morning. To me, not to you. Yuna's jaw was tight. The folder in her hand was absolutely still. He called me, Amara said, and told me to go get my sons, because they're his sons and he's done pretending otherwise. She let that settle. There's no version of this where the folder changes that. The lobby was very quiet. Then the door behind Amara opened and Tae-hyun came through it. He assessed the room in 1 second. Amara, Yuna, the folder, the specific atmospheric pressure of what he had walked into. And he came to stand beside Amara without touching her, but the positioning was not ambiguous. Yuna looked at him. Her face was doing something complicated, the controlled collapse of something that had been assembled carefully over 2 years. Give me the folder, he said. His voice was quiet. Yuna looked at him for a long moment. The folder was still in her hand. Yuna. His voice didn't rise. He said, give me the folder. She held it out. He took it. He did not open it. I know what Sujin offered you, he said, and I know why you took it. And I need you to understand that what you do in the next 60 seconds determines everything that comes after this. He held her gaze. Walk away. Right now. Don't contact Sujin again. Don't contact anyone about this. Don't make any more decisions based on what you found this week. Walk away, and I will treat the last 2 years with the respect they deserve. Don't, and I won't. The threat was not elaborated. It didn't need to be. Yuna looked at him. Then she looked at Amara. A long, complicated look, woman to woman. The kind that contained everything that wasn't going to be said. Then she turned and she walked out the lobby door and into the street, and she did not look back. The door closed. The lobby was silent. Amara let out a breath. Just one, slow and controlled. She looked at the folder in his hand. Is that all of it? I'll have Bae confirm, he said. But yes, I think so. She nodded. She looked at the door Yuna had gone through. She's not done, she said. Women like that don't walk away clean. They regroup. I know. He paused. I'll handle Sujin today. Her exit from the organization will be non-negotiable, and the terms will make clear what happens if she speaks. He paused again. It won't be violent, he said, and she heard that he had said it specifically, for her. I don't need it to be violent. I have other kinds of leverage. She looked at him. And Yuna? She'll be managed, he said. I need more than managed. She'll be neutralized, he said, professionally and socially. She has associations that depend on her connection to my organization. I remove the connection, she loses the associations. She becomes an ordinary civilian with a folder full of information that I will make it very clear she cannot use without consequence. Amara was quiet. Then, my sons are at my mother's. I know. They don't know any of this is happening. I know, he said. She looked at him. The lobby was empty around them, the afternoon light coming through the glass front in long rectangles, the city going about its business outside as if the specific gravity of this particular lobby were not enough to bend the ordinary world. Come to the park tomorrow morning, she said. Riverside, the one near Tuxeom, 9 o'clock. She picked up her bag. Bring yourself, not your organization. She looked at the folder in his hand. And bring that. I want to watch you destroy it. She walked to the elevator. He stood in the lobby with the folder and watched her go, and he thought about all the ways a man could be strong and still be entirely the wrong kind of strong for the people who needed him most. And he thought about a park at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and 2 boys who had been growing up in the same city as their father for 8 years without knowing his name. And he thought about how completely unprepared he was for what came next, and how that unpreparedness was not an excuse but simply a fact that he was going to have to walk through rather than around. The elevator doors opened. Amara stepped in. She did not look back at him. The doors closed. Taehyun stood in the empty lobby and held the folder in both hands and understood that everything that had come before this moment, the empire, the victories, the careful construction of a life built entirely on power, had been preparation for a test he hadn't known he was going to be given. And tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, standing in a riverside park with the truth in his hands and his sons 20 feet away, he was going to find out whether any of it had made him into something worth the name they were carrying in the middle of their own names, quiet and unannounced, like a question waiting 8 years for someone to finally answer it. He arrived at the park at 8:43. He had told himself 9 o'clock and he had arrived 16 minutes early, which was not something he did. He was a precise man, punctual in the particular way of people for whom time was a resource rather than a courtesy. An early arrival was for people who were anxious, and he did not allow himself anxiety. He stood at the entrance to the riverside path and understood that he was here early because some part of him needed the extra 16 minutes to prepare for something that no amount of preparation was actually going to resolve. The park was quiet at this hour. A Friday morning, overcast, the kind of sole autumn day that couldn't decide between cold and cool and settled on a gray middle ground. The Han River was visible through the tree line, flat and pewter-colored under the cloud cover, moving the way it always moved. Indifferent, continuous, indifferent. Dog walkers. A man running. A woman with a stroller moving at the deliberate pace of someone who was thinking, not exercising. He walked to the bench nearest the river path, the one with the best sight line in both directions, which was not strategic, he told himself. He was not conducting reconnaissance on a park. And then he acknowledged that 15 years of operating the way he operated meant that reading a space for sight lines was as automatic as breathing, and not something he could simply decide not to do. He sat. He had the folder with him. Inside it was everything Sujin had given Yuna, the original fabricated communications, the falsified witness statement, the constructed timeline. Bae had confirmed the previous night that this was the complete set. There were no other copies outstanding. Sujin had understood, with the clarity of someone who had made a very precise calculation about her own survival, that partial compliance was not compliance. She had handed everything over through Yuna, and she had made her exit from the Black Phoenix Syndicate before sundown on Friday. And the terms of that exit were documented in a way that made the cost of speaking about any of this very specific and very permanent. Yuna had gone quiet. He didn't believe quiet meant finished. He believed it meant she was recalibrating the way she always recalibrated, and he would need to monitor the situation. But the immediate pressure had been removed, and the geometry of what she could do without his organizational support was significantly smaller than what she could do with it. The threat was contained. Not eliminated. Contained. He sat with the folder on the bench and looked at the river and thought about what he was going to say to 2 8-year-old boys that would be honest without being catastrophic, and understood for the first time in his adult life that he had absolutely no framework for this. Every difficult thing he had navigated in 15 years had been navigable because he understood the terrain. Criminal organizations, territorial disputes, betrayals, alliances, negotiations where the stakes were measured in resources and power, and sometimes lives. He understood those maps. He had built his intelligence around understanding those maps better than anyone else in the room. He did not understand this terrain at all. He was a stranger to his own sons. He heard them before he saw them. Malik first, a voice that carried, that particular quality of volume that belonged to a child who was perpetually slightly more excited about the world than the world strictly required. Then Micah's voice, lower, one register of comment to Malik's announcement. Then Amara's voice, brief and even, the sound of a woman managing 2 energetic children through a park entrance with the automatic fluency of someone who had been doing it for years. He stood up. He stood up because sitting felt wrong, felt passive, felt like something a man did when he was waiting for something to happen to him rather than something he was choosing to walk toward. They came around the bend in the path. Amara saw him first. Her stride didn't change. She had prepared herself for this. He could see that, the same composure she had brought to every encounter that earned stillness of someone who had processed the situation before arriving in it. She was in dark jeans and a gray coat, and her hair was down, which he had not seen since the gala, and she looked like herself in a way that formal settings had made slightly less visible. Malik saw him second and slowed down with the instinctive caution of a child who has been raised by a careful mother to assess unfamiliar adults before engaging with them. Micah stopped completely. He stood on the path 10 feet away and he looked at Tae-hyun with those eyes, Amara's eyes, in the structure, but with something in them that Tae-hyun recognized with a physical impact that he had not fully anticipated, a recognition that traveled from his brain to his sternum like a current. And he was very still. Amara said, "Boys, come here for a second." They came to her. Malik leaned into her side slightly. Micah stayed where he was, still looking. The four of them stood in the gray morning on the riverside path. Tae-hyun looked at Amara. She gave him the smallest nod, barely perceptible, just the confirmation that she had told them something, that the ground had been prepared enough for him to speak. He crouched down. Not all the way, not to his knees, just enough to bring himself closer to their eye level, because towering over children and expecting them to receive anything from you was a choice he was not going to make. He looked at Malik first, because Malik was watching him with an open curiosity that was easier to meet than what was in Micah's face. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Malik said. Then, with the directness that very young children share with very old people, "Mom said you're our dad." The words went through him like something physical. "Yes," he said, his voice held, he was not sure how. "I am." Malik considered this for a moment with the focused processing of a child doing real-time information integration. "You didn't know about us?" "No," Tae-hyun said. "I didn't. That's my fault, and it's something I'm going to spend a long time being sorry about." "How come you didn't know?" "Malik," Amara said gently. "It's okay," Tae-hyun said. He looked at Malik. "Because I made a very bad mistake a long time ago. I believed something that wasn't true, and it hurt your mom, and because of that we didn't know each other." He paused, kept his voice even. "That's not your fault. It's not your mom's fault. It's mine." Malik absorbed this, turned to look up at Amara, then back at Tae-hyun. The moral calculus happening in his face was visible and genuine. "Are you sorry?" "Yes," Tae-hyun said. "I am." Malik appeared to file this under provisionally acceptable and looked toward the river. "Okay," he said, with the particular simplicity of a child who has not yet learned to make things more complicated than they are. "Can we go to the water?" "In a minute," Amara said. Tae-hyun looked at Micah. Micah had not moved and had not spoken. He was standing slightly apart from his brother and his mother, with his arms at his sides in that watchful, contained expression, and he was looking at Tae-hyun with something that Tae-hyun identified after a moment as the particular look of someone doing the thing he himself always did, reading, assessing, looking for the gap between what was being said and what was true. His son, 8 years old, already doing exactly what he did. "You were at the gala," Micah said. Tae-hyun held his gaze. "Yes. I saw a picture of you. I told Mom you had a face like mine." A pause. "She said lots of people have similar faces." Tae-hyun glanced at Amara. She had the particular expression of a parent who has been caught in a technically accurate non-answer and is not going to apologize for it. "She wasn't wrong," Tae-hyun said, looking back at Micah. "Lots of people do." Another pause. "And also, you have my jaw, and my forehead, and the way you're looking at me right now, that's something I see in the mirror." Micah looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you here now?" he said. Not accusatory, genuinely asking. "Because I found out the truth," Tae-hyun said. "And finding out the truth meant I had a choice. I could know about you and do nothing, or I could know about you and try to be something worth knowing." He held the boy's gaze. "I chose this." "You might not be good at it," Micah said. "I know," Tae-hyun said. "I'm probably going to be bad at it for a while." Something shifted in Micah's face. Not warmth exactly. Micah was not a child who moved to warmth quickly. Tae-hyun could see that, and he recognized it because he was not a person who moved to warmth quickly either. But something. A small, careful opening. "Okay," Micah said. He looked at his brother. "Malik, let's go look at the river." The boys moved down the path toward the water. Tae-hyun stood and watched them go. Malik immediately began looking for flat stones. Micah stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the water with that same particular stillness. Amara came to stand beside him. They stood several feet apart, which was correct, which was the right distance for what they were and were not to each other. He's going to keep asking questions, she said. He processes slow and deep. He'll think about this for days and then come back with something completely precise. I'll answer whatever he asks, Tae-hyun said. Even the ones you don't have good answers for? Especially those. He paused. I've been practicing honesty about my failures. It turns out there's a lot of material. She looked at the boys. Malik will forgive you in about 6 weeks, she said. He forgives easily. It's his best quality and his most dangerous one. Another pause. Micah will take longer, maybe a year, maybe more. And the forgiveness he gives you will be conditional and it will be earned. He doesn't give things away. No, Tae-hyun said. He doesn't. He watched his sons for a moment. I don't want forgiveness from them. I want to deserve it. Those are different things. Amara was quiet. He looked at her. The folder, he said. He held it out. I want you to watch me burn it. She looked at the folder. Then she looked around the park, the benches, the tree line, the ordinary Friday morning going on around them. Not literally, she said. No, not literally. He held the folder out. You take it. You choose what happens to it. I don't want it in my possession. She looked at him for a moment. Then she took it. She opened it. She looked at the contents. Not reading them in depth, she already knew what was in it, just confirming. Then she closed it. She walked to the nearest rubbish bin, and she put the folder in it, and she pressed it down, and she walked back. That's not burning, he said. No, she said. It's better. It's just garbage. He looked at the bin, then he nodded. They stood in the silence for a moment, watching Malik find a stone that satisfied some internal criterion and hold it up triumphantly. Micah examined it, made a comment, and Malik recalibrated his enthusiasm downward slightly. I'm not coming back to you, Amara said. Her voice was quiet and direct and completely without cruelty. I need you to understand that clearly, so there's no version of the next few months where you're waiting for something that isn't coming. We're not going to be what we were. I know, he said. Do you? Yes. He said it without qualification. I'm not here for that. I stopped having the right to that 8 years ago, and I'm not going to pretend that 4 days of doing the right thing recovers 8 years of loss. He paused. I'm here for them. Amara looked at him for a long moment. The assessment was thorough, and he let it be thorough. He had nothing to hide from it. There will be rules, she said. Tell me the rules. Consistency, she said. That's the first one and the most important one. You show up when you say you'll show up. You don't cancel because of business. You don't reschedule because something more important came up. To them, there is nothing more important. If you can't guarantee that, I need to know now before they get attached. I can guarantee it, he said. You run a criminal organization, she said. Not as an accusation, as a fact requiring acknowledgement. I know what I run, he said, and I know what it has cost. He looked at the boys. I'm not walking away from it overnight. That would be dishonest. But I'm going to restructure what it demands from me. I've been running it at a level of personal involvement that was always optional. I chose it because the organization was what I had. It doesn't have to be everything anymore. Amara was quiet for a moment. I'm not asking you to change for me. I'm not changing for you, he said. I'm changing because my sons deserve a father who has space for them. That's a different reason, and it matters that you know the difference. She looked at the river. Second rule, she said. Nothing from your world touches them. Whatever is happening in your organization, whatever the current conflict or alliance or situation, it stays completely separated. They never hear a name, never see a face, never encounter anything that connects them to what you do. Agreed. If I ever have reason to believe that rule has been broken, even once, you lose access, she said. I won't debate it. I won't give a warning. It ends. Understood, he said. Third rule. She paused. A longer pause. And he waited. You be honest with them. About who you are, about what you do, in age-appropriate terms, which I'll guide you on, and about what happened between us. As they get older and ask harder questions, you don't construct a comfortable narrative. You tell the truth. You were wrong. You made mistakes. You were absent. You tell them that." He looked at her. "Even the version that makes me look like exactly what I was?" "Especially that version," she said. "Because the only way they grow up with a real father, instead of a performance of one, is if the person they're getting to know is actually you. Flaws entire." He was quiet for a moment. "That's the hardest rule," he said. "Yes," she said, "it is." Down at the water's edge, Malik had graduated from finding stones to attempting to explain to Micah the aerodynamic principle, incorrect but enthusiastically held, behind why certain stones skipped better than others. Micah was listening with the expression of someone filing information under needs verification. Tae-hyun watched them. He thought about the 8 years. He did not let himself not think about them, because that was the kind of avoidance that turned into rot. 8 years of birthdays he had not known were happening. 8 years of school mornings and soccer games and whatever a child named Gerald the Cricket meant to an 8-year-old who had spent a week lobbying his grandmother for a terrarium. 8 years of the particular texture of daily life that made people into the specific people they became, and he had not been part of any of it. That was not going to change. The 8 years were not recoverable. They were simply what had happened, and the rest of his life would be built in full acknowledgement of them. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Amara looked at him. "The middle name," he said. "Kang. Why did you give them that?" She was quiet for a moment, long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then, "Because they deserve to know where they came from," she said, "even if the person they came from didn't know about them, even if he never knew." A pause. "It wasn't for you. I want to be clear about that. It was for them. So that if they ever asked, I could tell them the truth, that they carried it from the beginning, that it was always theirs." He couldn't say anything to that. There was nothing adequate. "Thank you," he said finally. The words were small, and they both knew they were insufficient, and he said them anyway because they were true. She nodded once, looked back at the water. Down the path, Malik had successfully skipped a stone twice, and was celebrating with a volume and physical commitment that startled a nearby dog walker. Micah turned to look back at them. Not at Tae-hyun specifically, at both of them, standing together at a careful distance, and something in his face did a very small computation, and then he turned back to the river. "He's watching us," Tae-hyun said. "He's always watching," Amara said. "He's been doing it since he was 3, cataloging." A pause that contained something faint. "He gets that from you." Tae-hyun looked at his son's back, the set of those small shoulders, the particular quality of stillness. "Come on," Amara said. She started down the path toward the boys. She did not gesture for him to follow. She did not look back to check if he would. She just walked toward her sons. He followed. Not because she had asked him to, not because he had been invited, or because the situation had resolved, or because anything was healed, or easy, or finished. He followed because moving toward them was the only honest thing left to do, and honesty, he was beginning to understand, was not a conclusion you arrived at. It was a direction you chose daily, and walked in regardless of what the terrain looked like. Malik heard him coming and turned around and said, "Can you skip stones?" With the immediate practical interest of a child who has just discovered a new skill and wants to assess every available participant. "I used to be able to," Tae-hyun said. "Show us," Malik said. He found a stone. He turned it in his hand, flat, smooth, the right weight, the kind he'd learned on a different river when he was younger than these boys. He stood at the edge of the path where the grass met the bank, and he threw it with the particular sideways release that he hadn't used in 20 years, and the stone hit the surface and skipped 5 times before going under. Malik made a sound of genuine outrage. 5. How? "Practice," Tae-hyun said. "Teach me," Malik said immediately. Tae-hyun looked down at him. This boy, who had forgiven him in real time without knowing there was anything to forgive, because Malik moved through the world with an openness that hadn't yet been taught caution. He crouched down beside him. "Find a flat one," he said. "Your index finger along the edge." They found stones. He showed Malik the grip. Malik tried 4 times and achieved 2 skips on the 4th attempt and turned to his mother with an expression of complete triumph. Amara was watching from a few feet back, her arms folded against the cool morning. And when Malik looked at her, she smiled, unguarded, real, the same smile he had seen in the surveillance photograph, the one that studio photography couldn't capture because it required a moment she wasn't performing for anyone. Micah came to stand beside Taehyun. He was holding a stone. He looked at Taehyun. "Show me the grip," he said. Not warmth, not coldness, just a practical request. Taehyun showed him. Micah adjusted the position of his fingers with the careful precision of someone who wanted to understand the mechanics, not just copy the motion. He looked at the water. He threw. The stone skipped 3 times. He looked at it for a moment, then he looked at Taehyun with the measuring expression. 3, he said. 3 is good, Taehyun said. You got 5. I've had 30 years more practice. Micah considered this arithmetic. Then if I practice for 30 years, I should be able to get 8, he said. Something in Taehyun's chest moved. He kept his face even. That's about right, he said. Micah turned back to the water and found another stone. They stayed at the river for an hour. It was not dramatic. It was not a reconciliation in the shape that stories sometimes made reconciliations look. No music, no embrace, no single moment that resolved everything into something clean. It was an hour at a riverside park on an overcast Friday morning. 2 boys skipping stones and arguing about whose technique was better, and gradually, incrementally, with the natural ease of children who have not yet learned that people are supposed to be difficult, beginning to include the tall, quiet man in their conversation, the way they might include any adult who was present and not actively boring. Taehyun spoke when spoken to and did not force himself into the spaces between. He understood that he was a new variable in a well-established system, and that the system, Amara, the boys, the life she had built, did not need him to function. He was not a rescuer. He was not a returning hero. He was a person who had been absent through his own failure and who had been given, by the grace of 2 small people who did not yet have the full context to understand what they were giving, a provisional space to begin. That was enough. It was more than enough. At 10:15, Amara said the boys had soccer practice at 11. The announcement was logistical, not a dismissal, and he heard the difference. Malik said immediately, "Can he come watch?" Amara looked at Taehyun. He looked at her. "That's up to your mom," he said. She was quiet for a moment. The assessment was quick. She had already made the calculation. He could see that. She had made it before he finished speaking. "Next week," she said. "We'll start with next week." Malik accepted this with the pragmatism of someone who understood that next week was a definite yes with a 1-week delay. He turned back to Taehyun and said, "You should practice your skipping before then. I'm going to be better than you by next week." "I doubt that," Taehyun said. "Challenge," Malik said, and held out his hand with the absolute seriousness of a child making a formal compact. Taehyun shook it. Micah watched this transaction from the side. He said nothing. But as they began walking back toward the park entrance, he fell into step beside Taehyun, not touching, not talking, just walking in parallel the way he had walked beside his mother on the path down. And the small companionship of that was so precise and so understated that Taehyun did not trust himself to look at it directly. He looked at the river instead. At the park entrance, Amar gathered the boys and pointed them toward where she'd parked. They went ahead. She stayed for a moment. She looked at him. He looked at her. There was a version of this moment in a different story where something was recovered, where the look contained the beginning of what had existed before and been destroyed. He knew that was not this story, and he did not look for it. What the look contained was this: 2 people who had been through something catastrophic and had come out the other side fundamentally changed by it, and who shared between them 2 human beings who were worth every difficult thing that the future was going to require, and who were both, in their own separate and irreconcilable ways, committed to those human beings above everything else. That was not a small thing. It was, in fact, the largest thing he had ever been part of. "Thursday evening," she said, "if you're available. I'm making dinner at 6. The boys eat at 6:30. You can come at 6 and help them with homework first if you want." He looked at her. Homework. Micah has a science report. Malik has multiplication tables he has been avoiding for 2 weeks. A pause. "You can manage multiplication tables?" "I run a financial organization," he said. Good, she said. Then you're qualified. She turned to follow her sons. Thursday at 6. Don't be late. She walked away. He stood at the park entrance and watched her go. Watched her catch up to the boys. Watched Malik immediately begin talking at full volume about the challenge and the stone skipping and the promised rematch. Watched Micah glance back once over his shoulder with those eyes that were Amara's in structure and his in expression, that precise evaluating look, and then look forward again. He stood there for a while after they were gone. The overcast sky sat low over the river. The water moved. The park went on being a park, ordinary, continuous, indifferent to the specific weight of what had just happened on this particular section of path. He was going to be at a dinner table on Thursday at 6 o'clock, helping his sons with homework he had played no part in assigning. He was going to sit across from a woman who had rebuilt herself from the ruins of what he'd done and who had given him access to her children's lives, not because she forgave him, but because her sons deserved a father, and she was too honest a person to let her own pain become their loss. He was going to be bad at this for a while. Micah had said so, and Micah was right, and the only thing that stood between bad at this and something better was time and the consistent choice, made daily, to show up. He could do that. He would do that. He walked to his car. He sat in it for a moment. He thought about calling Bay with a directive about the organizational restructuring he had been considering, the removal of himself from day-to-day operational management, the elevation of Shin and 2 other directors, the transformation of his role to something that required his judgment, but not his constant presence. He had been thinking about it since Wednesday. He had been thinking about it because the organization had been an identity substitute for the better part of a decade, and he was done letting it be that. He called Bay. He gave the directive. Bay was quiet for a moment, in the way that Bay was quiet when he was processing something significant. Then, understood. I'll begin the transition framework today. Take your time, Tehan said. Do it correctly. There's no urgency. That was new. Bay registered it without commenting on it. Yes, he said. Taehyun ended the call. He started the car. He pulled out of the parking area and onto the road that ran along the river, the same water visible to his left, gray and moving, the city rising on both banks. He drove with the particular steadiness of someone who knows exactly where they are going and is in no hurry to pretend the road is shorter than it is. Thursday at 6. Multiplication tables. A science report. Dinner at 6:30. He had spent 15 years building an empire. He had never once built anything worth more than what was waiting for him on Thursday evening at a kitchen table in a city that had held his sons for 8 years without his knowledge, and what was required to be worthy of it was nothing he had been trained for and everything he had finally decided to become. The river stayed with him on the left until the road bent and the buildings closed in and it disappeared from view, and he drove on through the ordinary morning, and Seoul went on around him, indifferent and continuous, and full of 10,000 lives being quietly remade by the choices the people living them finally got right.